In this world full of noise where everybody's talking, everybody's shouting, everybody's rushing to be heard, there is a quiet kind of power that most people overlook. Silence. Yes, silence. Not the silence of weakness, not the silence of fear, but the silence of wisdom, the silence of strength. Because when you choose silence, you're not surrendering, you're stepping into a higher kind of authority. You see, there's a difference between reacting and responding. A reaction is immediate, it's emotional, it's raw. But a response is mature, it's thoughtful, it's deliberate. And sometimes the best response is no response at all. That's not silence out of defeat, that's silence born out of discipline. Too many people lose their blessings by speaking too soon, by trying to defend themselves, by trying to fight battles with words that should have been left to God. But when you're silent, when you hold your peace, when you let the storm rage, but you don't let it inside you, that when the real power begins to rise, that's when heaven starts moving on your behalf. It takes strength to speak, but it takes even more strength to stay silent when everything in you wants to shout. That's the kind of silence I'm talking about. The kind that says, I don't need to prove myself to anybody. I know who I am. I know who my God is. I know what He's promised me. And I don't have to explain that to the world. There will always be people trying to pull you out of your peace, people who misjudge you, people who lie on your name, people who try to provoke a reaction from you just to see if they can disturb your spirit. But you've got to be wiser than that. You've got to be stronger than that. You've got to learn to stand still, stand firm, and stay quiet, because the moment you let them drag you into the noise, you've already lost the higher ground. The enemy doesn't just want to take your blessing, he wants to steal your focus, your clarity, your composure. He wants to get you so caught up in the noise that you forget the mission. But silence is your weapon. It's how you stay rooted. It's how you rise above. When you stop feeding the drama, it dies. When you stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you, your spirit gets lighter. Some of the most powerful moments in life are the ones that require no words. Think about Jesus when He stood before His accusers. They lied about Him. They twisted His words. They mocked Him. They tried to break Him with noise. But He didn't argue. He didn't beg for approval. He stayed silent because He knew who He was. And He knew that victory wasn't in the shouting, it was in the silence. And that's the example for you today. You don't have to speak on everything. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to let noise dictate your next move. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all and keep moving forward. People will wonder why you're so calm. They'll wonder why you don't clap back, why you don't retaliate, why you don't explain your side of the story. And that's okay, because your silence will speak louder than any explanation ever could. Your silence will confuse the enemy. Your silence will teach your soul how to trust God fully. Your silence will keep you positioned for the breakthrough. Don't mistake stillness for stagnation. You're not stuck. You're not forgotten. You're being preserved. You're being protected. You're being prepared for something greater. And the noise around you is just a distraction from the blessing that's coming. So don't give it your energy. Don't give it your voice. Let your silence do the work. Let your character do the talking. Let your peace be your protest. Some of the things you want so badly in life, peace, clarity, favor, restoration, don't come from shouting. They come from surrender. They don't come from reacting. They come from waiting. And they don't come from being loud. They come from knowing when to be silent. There's something most people don't understand about silence. It's not just about closing your mouth. It's about opening your spirit to a higher discipline. See, the tongue is a small part of the body, but oh, what power it carries. It can heal or it can destroy. It can lift someone up or tear them down. And more often than not, we don't realize how much damage we do, not with our fists, not with our actions, but with our words. That's why silence is not weakness, it's training, it's restraint, it's spiritual maturity. You don't grow just by praying and reading the Word. You grow when you can control your response, when you can bridle that tongue and say, not this time, I don't need to win this argument. I don't need to clap back. I don't need to explain myself. I'll let my silence carry the weight of my faith. Because the truth is, sometimes your mouth will speak death over the very blessing God is trying to bring into your life. You get frustrated and you start complaining. You get hurt and you start tearing others down. You get impatient and you speak against the process God is using to shape you. But when you learn to discipline your mouth, you begin to protect your spirit. You start to realize, I don't need to speak on every situation. I don't need to have the last word. God is my defender. God is my vindicator. And when I stay quiet, I give Him room to work. I give Him room to speak through the silence. There is no confusion in His voice. But if you're always talking, always reacting, always defending, how will you ever hear Him? Some of you are blocking your next level with undisciplined words. You're too quick to express what should have been taken to prayer. You're too quick to vent when God was calling you to wait. You're too quick to share your dreams with people who don't carry your destiny. And God is saying, be quiet, not because you're wrong, but because you're valuable. And valuable things are protected. Even in battle, the most dangerous warriors don't shout. They move with precision. They study the moment. They pick their timing. That's what spiritual discipline looks like. That's what silence produces. It gives you clarity. It gives you the ability to move with wisdom instead of impulse. And when your mouth is disciplined, your spirit becomes strong. You begin to say, I don't live by what I feel. I live by what I believe. I live by truth, not by emotion. There's power in a quiet soul, not a bitter soul, not a repressed soul, a quiet soul, one that's anchored, one that's trained, one that knows how to be still and know that He is God. You don't need to announce everything. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to trust that God sees what others don't. And if He sees it, He will reward it in His time. But you can't walk in that if you don't discipline your mouth. Because every word you speak is a seed. Every sentence you release shapes your atmosphere. And if you're speaking fear, frustration, bitterness, jealousy, don't be surprised when your life reflects those things. That's why silence is so important. Because when you don't know what to say in faith, it's better to say nothing at all. Some of you are going through battles right now, not with others, but with others. Your emotions want to lash out. Your pain wants to be heard. Your flesh wants to be justified. But listen, the strongest thing you can do in this moment is not to fight back. It's to say, Lord, guard my lips, train my heart. Help me speak only what gives life. There's a time to speak, yes, but only after you've been still, only after you've prayed, only after you've let the fire of emotion burn off so the truth can rise. A disciplined mouth is not silent forever. It just waits for the right time. It knows that not every opinion needs to be voiced. Not every insult needs a reaction. Not every wound needs to bleed on others. You want strength. Start with your words. You want peace. Start with your silence. You want growth. Start by telling yourself, my mouth will not speak what my spirit cannot carry. There is a strength in you that will only come out when you silence the world and discipline your own voice. There's a kind of silence this world doesn't understand, a silence that is not passive but powerful. A silence that says, I trust God more than I trust my emotions. You see, we've been taught that strength means fighting back. That power means having the last word. That winning means proving your point. But that's not the way the kingdom works. Sometimes the greatest act of faith is to stay silent and let God fight your battles. You don't need to answer every accusation. You don't need to defend yourself against every lie. You don't need to explain your heart to people who were never meant to carry it. God sees, God knows, and God keeps score. And when you go quiet, not because you're afraid, but because you're surrendered, that's when heaven begins to move. Let the world say what it wants. Let people believe what they will. Don't waste your strength trying to correct every false narrative. You were not called to be understood by everyone. You were called to be faithful. You were called to trust, and trusting means sometimes you stay silent, even when everything in you wants to speak, even when you've been hurt, even when you've been misunderstood, even when you've been wronged. You stay silent not because they're right, but because you know who your Redeemer is. You see, the battle isn't always out there. It's in here. It's in the heart. It's in the spirit. It's in the choice to believe that God is still in control, even when everything feels unfair. It's choosing peace when you could choose revenge. It's choosing patience when your pride is crying out for justice. It's saying, God, I trust you to fight this for me. I trust you to make this right. I don't need to carry the weight of this offense. I lay it down at your feet. There are moments when silence becomes your shield. Not because you're hiding, but because you're covered. Covered by grace, covered by wisdom, covered by a God who says, vengeance is mine. And if it belongs to him, then why are you trying to hold it? Why are you trying to carry what God already promised to handle? Some of you are tired not because the burden is too heavy, but because you keep trying to carry it in your own strength. You keep trying to fix what only God can fix. You keep trying to speak when God is telling you to be still. You keep trying to prove yourself to people who are blind to your worth. And God is saying, let Maine speak for you. Let Maine work for you. Let Maine show them who you are. Think about it. How many times has God delivered you in silence? How many times has he worked behind the scenes? How many times has he shifted hearts, opened doors, or removed obstacles without you having to say a word? That's the God we serve. He doesn't always announce his moves. He doesn't always explain his timing, but he always shows up right on time. And when you're quiet, you start to hear his voice more clearly. You start to feel his presence more deeply. You stop fighting for your own justice and start resting in his promises. And let me tell you something, God's justice is perfect. He doesn't miss a detail. He sees every tear you've cried, every insult you've endured, every betrayal you've carried silently. And he says, be still, I've got this. When you fight, you're working. But when you're silent, you're trusting. And trust is the key that unlocks victory. Trust says, I don't see it yet, but I know it's coming. I don't feel it yet, but I believe it's moving. I don't understand it, but I know he's working all things together for my good. Some of the loudest voices in your life right now are just noise, distractions. They want your attention. They want your reaction. They want your peace. But don't give it to them. Don't hand over your strength to people who are trying to pull you out of alignment with God. Hold your peace. Hold your position. And let the Lord show you what happens when you trust him in silence. You're not being overlooked. You're not being forgotten. You're being refined. You're being protected. Sometimes God silences you because if you spoke, you'd speak from pain. You'd speak from pride. You'd speak from fear. But when you wait, when you stay silent, when you trust, the words that do come will be full of grace, full of power, full of peace. So if you're in a season right now where everything in you wants to fight, wants to defend, wants to explain, don't. Be still. Be silent. And watch what God will do. He's not just going to bring you through it. He's going to show everyone around you who you really are, not through arguments, not through anger, but through glory. There are times in life when silence becomes the safest shelter for your spirit. Not because you're afraid of the world, but because your peace is too precious to trade for noise. We live in a time where everyone feels the need to speak, to explain, to justify every step they take. But there's something powerful, something sacred about being able to walk away quietly, to choose silence not out of weakness, but because you've learned that peace is more valuable than being right. Sometimes the most mature thing you can do is nothing at all. Just stay still. Just keep quiet. Just walk away not to avoid the fight, but to protect what God is building inside you. Because the enemy doesn't always show up with weapons. Sometimes he shows up with words. And the trap isn't in the insult, it's in your reaction. The real battle isn't out there, it's in how you respond. And when you choose silence, you win without swinging. There are moments when silence becomes your greatest act of strength. When you've got every reason to defend yourself, but you don't. When you could speak your truth, but you let God speak for you. When you could set the record straight, but you choose instead to rest in the fact that your life is in His hands. That's not being passive, that's being powerful in the Spirit. That's a kind of confidence the world can't understand. You see, walking away silently doesn't mean you didn't care. It doesn't mean you gave up. It means you decided your peace was too sacred to lose in a place where no one was listening. It means you finally realized that not every argument deserves your energy, that not every room deserves your presence, that not every voice deserves your answer. And when you know who you are in God, you no longer feel the need to prove anything to anyone else. It takes strength to stay quiet when your flesh is screaming to speak. It takes wisdom to walk away when your pride wants to win. But oh, what power there is in holding your peace. The world may call it avoidance, but heaven calls it discernment. The world may call it weakness, but the Spirit calls it wisdom. Because not all silence is empty, some silence is full of grace, full of resolve, full of trust that God will finish what He started. When you stay silent and walk away, you're not quitting, you're surrendering the battle to the only one who can win it. You're saying, Lord, I trust you to handle this. I don't need to carry this anger. I don't need to return this insult. I don't need to stand in the middle of chaos to prove that I matter. You know me, you see me, you go before me, and you will make all things right. There's a difference between noise and voice. And some people are just making noise. Some situations are just distractions sent to steal your focus, your anointing, your joy. And the best thing you can do is turn and walk away silently, prayerfully, confidently. Because while they're shouting, you're rising. While they're accusing, you're advancing. While they're plotting, God is preparing a table before you. Think about it. Jesus Himself, when accused, didn't answer back. He didn't fight to prove His innocence. He didn't lash out in anger. He stayed silent. Why? Because He wasn't there to win the argument. He was there to fulfill His purpose. And when you know your purpose, you stop trying to win meaningless battles. You stop defending yourself to people who've already made up their minds. You just keep walking in truth, walking in light, walking in silence, knowing that your destiny doesn't depend on their opinion. Some of you have been spending too much time trying to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Let them talk. Let them assume. Let them gossip. You don't need to chase down every lie. You don't need to fight every rumor. Your silence will speak louder than any defense ever could, because silence in the hands of God becomes a weapon. It becomes a testimony. It becomes a shield. And one day when God lifts you, when God blesses you, when God places you in the very position others said you'd never reach, your silence will echo louder than any shout. They'll see that you didn't have to clap back, you didn't have to curse, you didn't have to fight dirty. You trusted, you walked away, you kept your peace, and God honored that. So the next time you feel the urge to react, the next time you want to speak, to defend, to prove, pause, breathe, listen to the Spirit. And if He tells you to stay silent and walk away, do it. Not because you're afraid to fight, but because you finally realize not every fight is worth it, and not every silence is empty. There's a kind of silence that isn't just a moment, it becomes a discipline, a posture of the soul. It's the silence that comes when you've chosen to stop answering the same questions that once consumed your heart. You no longer ask, why did they leave? Or why did they hurt me? Or why did this happen to me? Because something inside you is finally settled. Not with the situation, but with the one who rules over it. You've chosen to stop asking because now you're trusting. We spend so much of our lives searching for answers that God never intended us to carry. We lose sleep trying to figure out the motives of others, trying to predict the future, trying to piece together a puzzle that only heaven holds the blueprint to. But silence, real silence, is when you surrender the need to understand everything and say, God, I don't need all the answers, I just need more of you. There's freedom in that. There's healing in that. When you stop questioning and start trusting, something shifts. Your heart begins to rest, your mind starts to breathe, and your spirit gets stronger. You no longer allow the confusion to rule over your days or the pain to define your nights. You no longer look back, replaying every detail, every word, every wound. Instead, you say, Lord, I place it in your hands. And that silence, that deep, still, holy silence becomes the sound of faith. It's not the silence of defeat, it's the silence of surrender. You no longer need to make sense of what broke you because you know the one who will rebuild you. You no longer chase explanations because you've been caught by grace, and grace doesn't always explain, it just restores. Grace doesn't always show you the reason, it shows you the way forward. Some of you are weary today because you've been wrestling with questions that were never yours to carry. You've been trying to figure out what they meant when they said what they said. You've been trying to read between the lines of silence, trying to find closure in places where there never was clarity. But I want to tell you something, closure doesn't always come from answers. Sometimes it comes from God's peace wrapping itself around your heart saying, you don't need to know, you just need to trust. And when you stop explaining your pain to everyone, when you stop looking for someone to validate your suffering, that's when you start healing. Because you realize that no one else can understand the journey you're on but the one who called you to it. You don't have to justify how deeply you loved. You don't have to explain how long you held on. You don't need to prove why it still hurts. God knows, and that's enough. You begin to walk differently when you reach that kind of stillness. You begin to see your past differently. Not as a chain around your feet, but as a testimony in your hands. Because what you walked through didn't break you, it refined you. What you lost didn't destroy you, it shaped you. And what they meant for evil, God is already using for good. You don't need to say a word about it. Just keep living. Just keep trusting. Just keep walking in silence with strength. There's something sacred about holding your story with reverence. Not everything needs to be shared. Not everything needs to be told. Some victories are so deep, so holy, that only heaven gets to celebrate them with you. And some wounds are being healed in places that words could never reach. That's why you've gone quiet. Not because you're broken, but because you're being rebuilt. This is the season to stop explaining your growth to people who never saw your pain. To stop opening your heart to those who only want to judge the process, not honor the journey. Be silent. Not in bitterness, but in strength. Not in resentment, but in trust. Because when God finishes what He started in you, the fruit will speak. The peace on your face will speak. The strength in your walk will speak. And you won't need to say a thing. So if you're in that place right now between the pain and the promise, don't rush to speak. Don't reach for answers that won't satisfy. Just rest in the silence. Rest in the knowing that your Father is working. Rest in the quiet place where healing begins. And when the time comes, when the season shifts, you'll rise not with explanations, not with bitterness, but with a silent strength that no one can deny. There is a silence that does not come from defeat nor from fear, but from divine preparation. A silence that God wraps around His chosen ones before He reveals them to the world. It's not emptiness, it's incubation. It's not neglect, it's nurture. God often hides His greatest work in silence, and if you're wise, you'll learn to embrace the quiet, not run from it. You see, we live in a world that wants everything fast and loud. Everyone is announcing their plans, posting their progress, displaying their dreams like trophies on a shelf. But God doesn't work that way. God doesn't reveal glory without first building character. And character is formed in silence in seasons where no one is watching, where no one is clapping, where no one is validating your worth. That's where He shapes you. That's where He strengthens you. That's where He prepares you to carry what He's about to place in your hands. Don't despise the season when your name isn't being called, when doors aren't opening, when recognition isn't coming. That's not punishment, that's protection. That's God saying, you're not ready yet, but I'm making you ready. He's not hiding you to harm you. He's hiding you to preserve you, to grow you in the dark before He brings you into the light. Like a seed in the soil, you don't see movement, but deep down life is happening. Roots are forming, depth is increasing, and in time that seed will break the surface and bear fruit that lasts. And while others are busy trying to be seen, trying to prove, trying to impress, God is looking for the one who's willing to be still, the one who's content in obscurity, the one who doesn't need a stage to feel significant, The one who's silent, not because they have nothing to say, but because they are waiting on the voice of the Lord. Because they've learned that timing is everything. You can be gifted and still not be ready. You can be called and still not be released. And if you step out too soon, you may step into a battle you were never prepared to win. So God keeps you in silence, not to punish you, but to preserve your destiny. Because He knows that what He's placed inside you is too valuable to be exposed before it's complete. There are lessons in the silence that you cannot learn in the spotlight. Lessons in patience, lessons in humility, lessons in trust, lessons in obedience when no one is applauding. And if you embrace the silence, it will teach you to rely not on noise, but on His whisper. He'll teach you how to hear Him when the world is shouting. He'll teach you how to follow Him when the path isn't clear. He'll teach you how to wait, not passively, but faithfully believing that the silence is not a void, but a voice. Because God speaks in silence. He refines you in silence. And He reveals you when the time is right. And let me tell you, when God reveals you, no one can ignore it. When God says it's time, the doors will open, and no man will be able to shut them. When He raises you up, you won't have to announce it. You won't have to chase platforms. Your fruit will do the talking. Your walk will carry the evidence. Because you allowed Him to build you in silence, He will trust you with the weight of the blessing. So don't rush to be seen. Don't rush to speak. Don't force your way into rooms God hasn't yet called you to enter. Stay silent. Stay hidden. Let Him finish the work. Let Him clean what needs cleaning. Let Him strengthen what's still weak. Let Him remove what can't go with you to the next level. Because the higher the calling, the deeper the preparation. And the deeper the preparation, the quieter the process. And one day you'll look back and thank God for the silence. You'll thank Him for the nights no one knew your name. You'll thank Him for the doors that didn't open. You'll thank Him for the prayers that weren't answered the way you hoped. Because it was in those moments, those quiet, unseen, silent moments, that He was making you into someone who could carry the calling, not just crave it. So if you're in a season where it feels like no one sees you good, that means you're exactly where God wants you. If you feel hidden, covered, even overlooked, rejoice. That means God is working in you something greater than what you could have built on your own. Be silent. Be faithful. Be still. Be silent and let God reveal you when your preparation has met His perfect time.